A couple of months ago, or something like that, a YouTuber named MathWiz came up with the idea to watch and sort of criticize one of his earlier videos to see how much he's changed, how his tastes have developed, how he communicate things differently, how he'd present things differently, just to sort of reflect back on where he's been and where he is now. So I decided to copy that. I feel like that's one of the best ways to get this channel running, and I don't have any ideas that I'm as comfortable with right now. So I figured it would be fun. Now, the video I'll be doing is one that, looking back on it, I don't think it's very good, but I haven't watched it in about a year and a half, so I could be wrong. Um, and that is this video right here, my character analysis of the three royal guards from Hunter x Hunter. I'm doing this one because last month I released a Shiapoof video, which covers the dynamics of his character, his relationship with Meruem, and how he contrasts and compares with the other royal guards. So that one is sort of an addendum to this one, and an improvement in basically every way, as far as I'm concerned. There is no need for this video to exist, given that this new one exists now. That's the way I'm thinking about it right now. So I figured it would be fun to kind of look back on this and see if I'm right. See what I would change now, criticize myself, because a lot of people have been asking me how to get their YouTube channel started, certain things that they can work on, and how to improve, basically. And while I don't think I'm the authority to ask, I don't think I'm an authority on that sort of thing because I still have a long way to go, and I'm pretty flattered and humbled by people asking me these things. Um, People ask them anyway, and they want to know my opinion. So this could be a fun way to give it. So anyway, sorry for rambling. Let's just start it. Um, I'm expecting to pause this every few seconds because I don't imagine that it's going to be any good. But again, I could surprise myself. Who knows? Oops. Okay. First of all, the visuals are not very good. Let's just say that. It's kind of pixely. Hunter x Hunter, written by. Okay, right off the bat. Sorry if I sound picky. I know this is only 18 seconds in, but listen for a little bit of a pop at around 16, 17 seconds. This is something that drives me insane. Hunt right there. The little where the music transitions to being softer and before I start talking. What I used to do in my earlier videos with the background music is I'd have it really loud for the opening intro to the video. And then when I started talking, obviously I had to lower the volume, but I'd just go from this high to this low with no transition, no gradual decline in volume. It would just be like this to this. And that causes an audible pop in the video that's very noticeable. It's pretty jarring and it's pretty amateurish. So a lot of, or not a lot, but a few people pointed that out to me, and I knew it myself. So it's something I changed pretty soon after this video, I think, maybe a month or two. But that's something. Hunter x Hunter, written by Yoshihiro Togashi, is one of the most critically acclaimed manga series of all time. Whilst it's never been as popular as some of the more prominent series of the same genre, Hunter x Hunter has been steadily increasing in popularity in recent years thanks to Madhouse's newer 2011 adaptation. Most of that I think is just fluff and not really necessary for the video, but it's not terrible. I mean, it was one of my first videos. I had to introduce the topic somehow. It's not great, but I wouldn't say it's abysmal. One thing is that my tone of voice is pretty terrible in these earlier videos. Um, just listening to it,
There are some of the more prominent series of the same genre.
it's so it's so dull and boring and monotonous. There's no excitement. There's no cadence. You can hear me taking audible swallows and huge breaths in between. And I take breaths for the videos I do now, but there's a rhythm to it. Here it's just me, I don't know, droning on without any purpose, just reading a script. It's very obvious that it's scripted, and it's not very engaging to listen to. Someone once told me that I sounded like a drunken walrus uh, when uh, when I commentated, and I agree with them
Has been
for my earlier videos.
steadily increasing in popularity in recent years thanks to Madhouse's newer 2011 adaptation. This is completely justified. It's fresh, imaginative, diverse, full of brilliant ideas and great fights. The show also contains some quite deep and complex character development and internal explorations, though this aspect of Hunter x Hunter doesn't properly show itself until the famous Chimera Ant arc.
That's untrue. There's plenty of character development and exploration prior to the Chimera Ant arc. A lot of it being in York New. But yeah.
This video will attempt to analyze three of the biggest and most powerful players of the Chimera Ant arc. The King's Royal Guard. Pito, Poof, and Yuppie were conceived by the Queen to provide the King, Meruem, with absolute devotion, protection, and loyalty.
Pronunciation
However,
isn't great,
their programming
but,
contained
never
one
has been.
devastating malfunction: the ability to experience human emotion.
Listen to my voice. That's friggin' terrible. Oh my god. It's one flaw. The ability to human emotion.
With absolute devotion, protection, and loyalty. However, their programming contained one devastating malfunction: the ability to experience human emotion. As such, these royal guards are all extremely loyal, though they go about their loyalty in contrasting ways. The three have varying levels of popularity among
See,
fans
if you
of the
know, if you
series.
pay attention to the gaps in between sentences, you can tell that they were the same recording and that I was kind of gathering my breath in between them. And that's natural for someone to have to do in between sentences, but it shouldn't be obvious to the person watching the video. Um, what I usually do is I say a sentence, I stop, I take a breath, I collect, and then I say it again, and then I edit it, or I say the next sentence, and then I edit it in Audacity to make sure that it flows properly. But I don't know if you can tell, the audio quality of this video is much worse than it is in my other videos because I was recording with my iPhone 6. That was my microphone. And I couldn't cut anything, or I didn't have an app or any means to cut anything to make it into a better rhythm. So I was literally just talking and emailing myself the audio and then putting it into the finished product. I wasn't doing any audio editing, and that's pretty terrible.
And I think that each of them have enough about their characterization to merit analysis. Without further ado, let's get started.
I wouldn't recommend doing the without further ado, let's get started. This video will tackle blah 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 that often. I think it's just kind of high school essay-ish. But I do some stuff like that once in a while. Just I wouldn't recommend it for most of the time.
We start with the first Royal Guard and the fan favorite Pito. By the way, I'm going to refer to Pito as a she, even though her gender is ambiguous.
Shouldn't have said that. Should not have brought gender into this.
Pito is a very distinct character. Despite being quirky and almost playful, she's even more brutal, terrifying, and sadistic. She has a thirst for bloodshed and will go to incredibly dark ends to protect her king and his plans. When we first meet her, she seems to have no morals and no empathy, simply acting on impulse and following orders. Pito's brutal slaughter of Kite and the way she disturbingly probed Pockle's brain illustrated just how sadistic she was.
So my interpretation of Pito these days is quite a bit different from what I said in this video. I go on and talk about how sadistic and brutal she is and how she intentionally is sort of evil and she thirsts for blood because she's just psychotic or psychopathic. And I don't actually think there's definitely an aspect of that to her as well, but it's not as big as I was making it seem. It's a sort of minor element to her character. I think primarily Pito is pretty similar to a cat, which would make sense, obviously, in that her natural instinct is to find prey that opposes her and Meruem and the royal guard, etc., and eliminate it. Um, of course, she has fun doing it, but I wouldn't say that her intention is primarily to cause pain as much as it is for her own, for her duty and for her own job. So there is an element of sadism to Pito. I wouldn't dispute that, but it's not nearly as big as I make it seem. She's very instinctual, um, following her duty and her what her natural urges tell her to do. Um, so I basically disagree with most of this section, I think.
The one big difference between her and the other royal guards is that she does.
Also, note that the top portion and bottom portion of the video was cut off. That's because the files I got to edit the video had subtitles on them, and I wanted to cut them off, so I just made it widescreen, which is lame. I should have got the raw files, or I should have just kept it on, which isn't as good, but I think it's better than cutting off like a quarter of the screen.
Doesn't particularly mind Komugi and the king's fixation with her. And this may seem minor, but this little aspect of her personality kickstarts a domino effect that becomes apparent in the later part of the arc. Pito remains quite evil until the unbelievably epic and brilliant castle
Again, I wouldn't say she's evil.
storming sequence, in which the show subverts the watcher's expectations of her. Once Pito realized the gravity of the situation and the fact that Meruem was in legitimate danger, a switch flicked in her, and she became dead set on preserving the king's happiness and safety. From mid-episode 111 and on, Pito does not utter a single playful or silly comment. She doesn't show her feline charm.
A lot of this is just restating what the anime slash manga
that the king
told us about.
For Komugi above
so
all else,
I wouldn't say there's much value in repeating this much without expanding upon it in a unique way.
That it's quite a shock to see her act this way. This type of character development humanizes Pito. She's not playing games, she's not scary, she's not sadistic. She's just trying to protect and help someone that she cares for. This rapid character development is not out of character. It's just never been exposed due to Meruem never really having been threatened before.
Hear that? Never really.
It's just never been exposed due to Meruem never really having been threatened before. The scene where Pito is confronted by Gon whilst trying to save Komugi is absolutely masterful, for a bunch of reasons. Firstly, the fact that Pito's personality deviates from the other two guards at this point paints her in a more positive light. Poof and Youpi mechanically think of Komugi as a nuisance that's distancing the king from...
See, none of this is really that wrong. This is separate from the Pito is evil stance I was taking earlier. None of this is really wrong. But a lot of it is just summarizing what is presented within the story and saying this is good. Pito is humanized here. She's different than Youpi and Poof because she's thinking with compassion. This is masterful. Like I don't really get the value in this section of the video.
From his destiny, while Pito doesn't really care about Meruem's destiny because she prioritizes his feelings above all else. Pito's sudden character change humanizes her and subconsciously warms the viewer to her, despite her prior evil. The writing for this character was so brilliant that within a span of a few episodes, I went from wanting Pito dead 100 times over to basically hoping Gon didn't kill her because she almost seemed redeemable. In this scene, Pito breaks her arm, gives up, submits, and desperately begs Gon to spare Komugi. This enrages Gon and confuses the viewer. Why is this evil villain suddenly acting so human? Why does she almost seem harmless? It would be so much easier if she was still her cruel and wicked self, because that would have made the story more straightforward. But this is...
I don't know, it's kind of cringy. The reason it's better in the Shai-Poo video is because I talk about why Pito is the way she is. She's compassionate, she has empathy, etc., and I contrast it with the other royal guards, talking about how she differs from them and why that has led her to lead a more meaningful life, contrasting with the themes of Poof, Youpi, Meruem, and the Chimera Ant arc as a whole. I don't know, it's just put together much better than it is here, where I just say she's humanized, and this causes dilemmas within the viewer, and so that's good. I don't know. It's
Is
not
Hunter x
terrible,
Hunter, and this
but
is Togashi's wondrous writing.
yeah, I'm
My
kind of dick
favorite
riding
Pito
Togashi as
moment
well.
happens near the end of her life, when she admits to Gon that Kite is beyond saving.
もう元には戻せないんだ。
Yeah, including this quote is a good way to show that
ごめんね。
that she's
That's
genuinely developed and genuinely feels sorry for Gon.
undoubtedly regret and remorse in Pito's voice. Now that she has experienced the fear of losing someone, Pito understands Gon's immense pain and feels sorry for him. Pito was always going to be doomed with the strange and wonderful direction that Gon's character arc went in. And her
See, I also think that my tone in this voice is way too dick ridey. It's way too complimentary to the story. It makes me come off as a fanboy because every 20 seconds or so I'm just saying this was great writing, this is amazing writing. And it's just too much. It's just too much.
brutal end was so poignant because it seemed like she had developed so much within such a short amount of time, and was on the cusp of true humanity and redemption. It's hard to know for sure, but perhaps Pito wasn't hostile towards Komugi from the beginning, because a small part of her realized that the king cared for her and didn't want to compromise that. It's
That's a
such a
pretty good point.
unique and amazing character and character arc that Togashi has crafted here. Pito's journey is both thematically relevant, emotionally conflicting, and resonant.
Why is it thematically relevant? I didn't explain that.
The fact that she dies satisfied because she has protected her king in Komugi, it's hard not to feel a bit of sympathy for her. Characters written with as much subtlety and skill as Pito are part of the reason that Hunter x Hunter stands head and shoulders above the rest of modern anime.
More dick riding. It's too much. It's too much. I'm cringing already and I'm not even halfway done. And my voice is so monotone.
Yuppie is a criminally underrated character.
Again with the
He
audio
tends to be
pause
the
back
least
there.
talked about of the Royal Guards, but he's a well-written character in his own right. From the off, Yuppie is ironically unique in that he has literally no individuality. He's not playful like Pito or artistic like Poof. He assimilates his identity with his duty. He's a little dense and dim-witted, but ultimately he does his duty, carries out his orders, and kills whoever needs to be killed without question.
That was pretty well said, I think. I think that's one of the best, probably the best point of the video so far. No individuality, assimilates with duty, etc., etc.
Yuppie does consider Komugi a hindrance, but never steps out of line until arguably his final moments. He's efficient. He prioritizes the king above all else and does his job with intensity and passion, but without being obsessive like Poof. This passion that he
That
has
was a
is the
terrible
foundation
pause
for all of his
in
later
my
development.
in my commentary.
What's interesting about Yuppie is that all of his character... Yuppie appreciates the effort that the hunters have put into their fights so much that he shows mercy and spares them all. The logical thing to do, and what Yuppie's past self would have done...
Yeah. So here I just talk about what is. Oh. Okay. Here I just basically talk about how the best thing for him to do would be to kill them because they're enemies of the king. It's all pretty good. I think Yuppie's section, I remember it being the best section of this video. So far it's not been bad. I think it's way better than Poof's.
He's developed
Or
a sort
sorry,
of knightly honor and
Pito's.
pride akin to certain characters in Fate Zero. His respect towards the hunter means that he simply doesn't want to slaughter them. Knuckle himself sees this and consequently views Yuppie in a new light. He now respects him.
You can see the
whereas
tips of the
before he thought
subtitles
him as
over here.
apparently views Yuppie in a new
You can
light.
see the words.
He now respects him, whereas before he thought of him as a mindless monster. The amount of character development that Yuppie experiences within the microcosm of a fight is pretty incredible. Of course, Yuppie retains his sense of duty post-transformation and ends up regretting his mercy when he sees what has become of his king. But this is only because he thought the hunters knew of the miniature rose, and none of his development is rendered inconsequential.
I agree.
Having seen the way Yuppie had grown sort of a knight's chivalric code, I did feel a bit sympathetic towards him with the way his story ended. Everything involved with Yuppie's character and character arc perfectly.
I think I'm talking a bit too much about how I felt instead of going into the specific mechanisms of each character. Because now for Pito and for Yuppie, I've said I felt sympathy for them because etc. etc. I don't know. I try not to talk about my gut reactions to certain story developments in my videos these days because I don't think it adds anything to the points I'm trying to make. I don't know. I just wouldn't phrase it that way anymore.
Illustrate the themes of evolution and underlying humanity that are so profoundly associated with the Chimera Ant arc.
Again, could have elaborated on that, but whatever.
He tends to be hated for his later antics, perhaps thought of as a character that's insane just for the sake of it. But his character is, in my opinion, perhaps the most poetic we see in the show.
So this was probably the most necessary part of the video because there are so many misconceptions around Poof and people thinking that he's a bad character or just over dramatic for no reason, and that there's no semblance of thematic resonance to him, no meaning to him, and he's just insane for the sake of it. So this is the most necessary part of this video. And honestly, no one really talked about this until I did the follow-up video on Poof as well. So it continued to be one of the most important parts about Hunter x Hunter, I think. So many people misunderstand and dismiss Poof for because he's the way he is, but he's such a good character. It's a shame because my explanation of him in this is pretty shallow, but that's why I corrected it.
There's quite a lot to Poof playing his violin. And speaking of Poof's violin, let me just digress for a bit here and
The
say
music
that,
is
believe
too
it or
loud
not,
here, by the way.
that instrument is a big part of the reason
It's competing
that the
with my
Chimera Ant
voice.
arc has such a
The music's competing with your voice, and as soon as that happens, it's too distracting.
unique and special tone that starkly contrasts prior arcs in the series. It adds an element of otherworldliness and maturity to the arc that we had not seen up until this point.
That's true.
The imagery of a tall, somber man playing a violin integrated with such horrifying imagery just added a layer of mystique to many of the montages and scenes. Violin-based songs themselves dominate the soundtrack of the arc as well. During times of tragedy or lamentation, we hear somber ballads.
Yeah.
The violin is just a subtle little tool that the show's directors, writers, sound designers, and composers
Okay, I talked about that
for
a little bit
integrating
too
such
long.
a small Back to my original point. Poof holds the king up to nearly impossible standards. In his eyes, Meruem should have experienced a straightforward trajectory towards becoming the pinnacle of
Again,
evolution
stumbling over my
and
words. I should
literally
have
dominating the world.
re-recorded that.
Yet, the king's development stalls when he meets Komugi. 2 point, serving the king meant serving his ideal king.
Yeah.
A
If
king
you see my
without
Shy Poof
emotions
video, you know this
doesn't
already.
desire to be served in Poof more and more human. Becomes increasingly unstable and insane as the king becomes more and more human.
Like these are all good
as
points.
the king bonds with Komugi,
They just could have
and
been
as Poof
expanded
spirals
upon a
deeper
lot
and deeper
more.
into pure madness, the antagonist label of the series slowly but surely shifts from Meruem to Poof. By the latter parts of the Chimera Ant arc, I despised Poof, but simultaneously admired just how well written and explored of a character he was.
Again, I'm saying I felt this way about him. I don't know. I wouldn't do it anymore. Maybe it's not even bad. It's just something I wouldn't choose to do these days anymore.
It may be jarring to witness Poof's bizarre monologues and strange fantasies, but this is character development and exploration at its absolute
I'm also talking
best.
pretty slow, which,
The
along with my
malfunction in
monotone
Poof's
voice, isn't
programming
great.
is his beyond fanatical devotion to his ideal king, though not Meruem himself, which is a very human personality trait. He's unlike any other character I've seen in fiction, and the Chimera Ant arc and Hunter x Hunter as a whole wouldn't be the same without him.
Again, in every section, I relate them back to the Chimera Ant arc and how they dovetail and contribute to the themes of it, but I never explain why it contributes. Poof contributes to the Chimera Ant arc because he's all about the duality of humanity, which I explained in my Poof video. The negatives, the ugliness, but the beauty and the joys of humanity. Intertwined with the other arcs of the series, how with Gon, how anger and lust for revenge and narrow-minded one-dimensionality can lead to devastation. That theme is identical to Poof's in terms of being so narrowly focused on one thing that you lose it, and then everything else in your life is tossed by the wayside, and you destroy everything in your path. Those two together contribute to a strong message about humanity within the arc. Then, in terms of the beauty of humanity, the way that Poof was so full of love and joy and art dovetailed beautifully with Meruem and Komugi and their relationship, and with Yuppie and the way he felt when he contributed to the king's resurrection. So there are so many different things about Poof that contribute to humanity as a whole, the theme of humanity as a whole, the different facets of it. But I don't describe anything. I just say Poof is great because the themes associated with him, evolution, blah 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 blah, is associated with the themes of the Chimera Ant-Arc, and it strengthens the message. But I give no examples why. This is a little bit nitpicky, but I don't know. I'd hold videos to a higher standard than this if they intend to be analytical. Still, it wasn't terrible. I wouldn't use this music anymore. Like, I don't know. Is this montage really necessary?
There's so much to say about Hunter x Hunter, and I haven't even touched on some amazing characters like Killua, Kurapika, Hisoka, and Meruem,
I still haven't touched on Killua.
along with some breathtaking story moments. All I've said here about the Chimera Ant arc only scratches the surface of what it really achieves. This arc is dark, tragic, deep, poetic, and beautiful, and Pitou, Poof, and Yuppie are big reasons as to why it's so successful with what it does. As you can see, the three royal guards all had one dominant character trait that humanized
This
them.
is the best point, I
Pitou
think.
had empathy, Poof had absolute devotion to the point of madness,
Except right there, I say that Poof's trait was loyalty and devotion to the point of madness. Poof's human flaw was not loyalty. It was idealization, which led to a loyalty of a false king, a king that wasn't that didn't exist. That's a common misconception, and one that I used to have as well. Poof's flaw is not intense loyalty; it's idealization.
and Yuppie had honor. If you consider the
And the
Royal
other two
Guard's
are
original
fine.
purpose in life, these traits can objectively be considered tragic flaws. Pitou's empathy was
This is-
unnecessary for the
this is a
purpose
good
of a
point.
Royal Guard, and did nothing to help the king's physical safety. Poof's job was to serve and protect the king, not to try and make his decisions for him. Yuppie's decision to spare direct enemies of the king was unthinkable from a Royal Guard's perspective. Loyalty, love, respect...
I just listed adjectives and descriptors and different themes. Like, I don't know. It's weak. It's weak. I just say there's themes of humanity, love, loyalty, without delving upon them in the video itself. I think that isn't too bad if you talk about it within the video, but I just mention it and assume that you know what I mean, which leans too much on the viewers connecting the dots, and it's lazy.
and duty. These themes integrate into the Chimera Ant arc beautifully and help to make it one of the best stories I've ever seen in anime.
There I'm talking from a false sense of, not superiority, but authority, a false sense of authority. I said it's one of the best things I've ever seen in anime, when at this point I had seen like 15, 20 shows. I had seen nothing. Okay. So, I don't know. It was basically what I was expecting, and it definitely had quite a bit of value at that time, nearly 2 years ago, when no one was talking about Hunter x Hunter on the internet, or on YouTube, sorry. But it's pretty shallow. It doesn't have that much unique insight, except for the tragic flaws concept and little things with Yuppie and Poof. The Pitou part, I don't think has much value. And overall, my voice was way too monotone. There was no rhythm or good cadence to my communication and speaking. Um, and I'd just say that, I don't know, if I were to rate it, I'd give it like a 5.5 or 6 out of 10. Like I said, in the beginning, there's no reason for this video to really exist, given that my Shaipu video is out now. Um, but I'm going to keep it on here because it keeps making me money. It's got a lot of views. A lot of people have some great comments on it, and it's still generating discussion. So I'm going to keep it. But yeah, it wasn't great. But I think that if you go back to your earlier videos as a YouTuber and you look back on them and you don't think that you've improved or that you would do things differently with them, then you haven't really developed. So that's cool in that sense. But I hope that this was useful in some way. And I promise I'll get better at speaking off the cuff, unscripted. It's just a little bit of a process getting my thoughts in order and being concise. Hope you guys enjoy this. I might do it again because it's kind of fun to reflect on where you've been and how you would change things now. But yeah, thanks, guys.